always remember when I started to get what I would say good at golf was very much by mimicking Tiger. And that's probably the same for lots of golfers in and around my sort of era. Watching Tiger week in, week out, playing golf all the time to such a high level, it was almost impossible to not end up wanting to mimic him. And that was what happened. Now, there were two parts to the mimicking motion for me. One part was the general movement, which we're going to talk about today. But the second part was the tempo and timing, which we'll come back to in another lesson and another video. But I always felt that when I was playing my best golf, I had synchronization. And I always felt that my arms were in synchronization to my body. And when I felt that they wasn't playing my best golf, I was sort of out of sequence and fighting it. Now, as time has gone on, and I don't play at a competitive level anymore, and I turn my aspirations more to coaching, what I've always wanted to do as a coach is understand what those feelings were. So when I sort of used to watch Tiger, I used to kind of watch that iconic sort of upward finish, similar to what I'm trying to demonstrate here. He always looked to me like he was very much up, and that his arms were working very much in keeping, and quite often he'd hit quite a lot of shots where he would sort of hold the club off, which means the club would sort of finish more this way and reducing any arm rotation. And although that I would have success trying to mimic that, I didn't really understand precisely what it was that I was doing apart from just mimicking Tiger's motion. But as I've understood the golf swing better, I have a much better understanding of why those movements are so impossible. Those movements are so important, and they're not so impossible to achieve. And that's what I want to talk about today, particularly how you're going to get that feeling of rotating through the ball and not using your arms. So the first part of this exercise is understanding the hip rotation. So what you want to do is you want to place an alignment stick vertically in the ground or in a bucket so it can prop itself up in the ground, and then place the other alignment stick through your belt loops. What you're then going to do is get yourself in a position where the alignment stick is pretty much in line with the part of your lead ankle. And that's the first part of the motion. Understanding that as we swing through, we need to continue the hips to rotate through the ball. And the feeling really is that as we start the downswing, we'd get the weight on the lead side. And then as we come in towards this sort of release and let the arms go, you see the way my lead hip would continue to collide with the cane that's behind me. So that continuation of rotation is absolutely fundamental, because the problem that you would have if you don't continue to rotate and you kind of get stuck, then that's when you're going to end up getting handsy. And this is quite a typical amateur thing. What we see with the pros is that, yeah, they sort of shift onto this lead side, but from then here, they just continue to rotate. And that is a massive part of it. So with students of mine that I work with online, this is a drill that I'll get them to do. They can just sort of practice this in and around the house. And you'll just tend to find that, yeah, it will kind of trigger just naturally good motion without you having to think about it. Just try and keep that head still and get the feeling of colliding that alignment stick that's behind you. And that's the first part of this. If you can get the feeling of what the lower body's doing, then you can start to incorporate what your chest should do. So the way that you're going to not hit the ball with your arms, which obviously is very much a feeling rather than a reality, is we need to do a couple of things. The first thing that we're going to have to do is encourage good chest rotation. The reason why the chest rotation is so important is because, well, you could demonstrate this in two ways. Let's start with one of my favourite ones, which is using a little bit of rope. You get a bit of rope, again, something that I encourage a lot of my students to do, and then you can just hold it like so that I'm applying pressure to keep this nice and straight. I then take hold of the club. I need to fiddle around with it just to get the length correct. But again, my sort of point is, what we need to do is we know that we need to keep this lead hip moving back, but I also, if I can keep my chest moving through, see the way I can keep my arms straight. If I sort of pull my lead hip back and I don't move my chest through, that's about as far as my arms are going to be able to progress without them rolling or folding. So getting that chest rotating towards the target, similar to what I'm demonstrating here, is basically going to give you the ability to keep the arms straight or straighter. And if I swing towards you, if I sort of keep my arm straight, the club face is going to look more like so and avoid this type of motion. Now, I'm not saying that this motion is poor. I'm just trying to explain that the importance of rotation. And there'll be a lot of good golfers out there who don't like the club getting stuck behind them and excessive arm rotation. And the way you're going to get rid of that is you have to incorporate better chest rotation. So by simply practicing the alignment stick drill and then getting a feeling of your chest moving through will help you in a big way. Another way you can practice this is literally just to place the club pretty much in your sternum. And again, try and keep the club moving through. You'll notice your chest will have to move. If your chest doesn't move, then, well, you're going to end up with those sort of folded arms or excessively rotated arms, which again is potentially going to lend itself to a lack of stability of that club face. The last little piece of the puzzle really would fall into the downswing. So if you sort of understand that your chest is supposed to rotate, because that means that your arms can stay a lot quieter and straighter and your hip needs to come back, those are key skills to be able to identify. But obviously if I'm demonstrate a backswing position here, I can't immediately do that type of motion. It just won't work. So what we need to do is you need to kind of swing up to the top and then feel that weight shifting towards that lead leg. Once you feel that weight shift into that lead leg, then that's going to be your response to trigger the motions that we've just potentially practiced and learned. You can associate this very much to throwing a ball. If you were going to sort of throw a ball with a decent amount of distance, you would sort of wind back, you would step, and then you would push off. You would wind back, you would step, and then you would push off. So what we've learned is this bit. What you do need to practice now is just understanding pushing weight back in towards that lead leg. You could do this in a couple of ways. You could go back to the alignment stick, placing it through your belt loops and get the feeling of the alignment stick going down as you rotate into that lead leg. But also what tends to happen with a lot of students of mine is just building that awareness, just sort of practicing swinging up to the top of the backswing position, and then as you start the downswing, just pause at this position. So where your lead arm is roughly horizontal to the ground, if not slightly lower, my weight's on my lead side, and then get the feeling of those arms moving back up and behind you. You can also do a step drill. A step drill would be where you would set up to the golf ball, put your lead foot by your trail foot, and then just do a couple of swings where you do the takeaway. Okay, so just make sure the club moves back in a straight line for a little bit, then step, then come back out. And what that type of exercise is going to do in terms of this step is, again, it's just going to give you that feeling of loading in towards that lead side and then pushing off it. There's different ways to do this. One of the things that we'll come back to in an upcoming video is the tempo. And I think by practicing with the tempo also encourages very good movement, especially alongside a step drill. But again, what I really wanted to talk about is how do you hit the golf ball without using your arms? And that is effectively how you're going to do it. And the way I learned it was by copying Tiger, and hopefully the way you guys could do it is by, well, one, copying Tiger, but two, also following a couple of the steps that I've highlighted in this video. See you soon.